Yo, what is up guys? It's me, Zachary, back bringing you some more NBA news and updates. Hope you are all having a fantastic day, but you guys already know the drill around here. You already know that we have a lot to talk about today, so let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. Let's go. For our first story of the day, we had to take yet another look at all of the drama surrounding the NBA officials and the Houston Rockets. This has been the talk of the town for the past 72 hours. I suppose not as much now that Game 2 is already over, but more on that later. But still, leading all the way up till Game 2 and even during Game 2, the entire NBA world had its eyes fixated more so on the referees than the actual game itself. And of course, that's due to the officiating that went down in Game 1, with the Houston Rockets complaining after that game that they weren't getting a fair shake from the officials and that the officials seemed to be favoring the Golden State Warriors. James Harden saying that he just wants a fair shot in the series, and Mike D'Antoni, head coach of the Rockets, tried not to comment too much on it, saying that he doesn't want to catch a fine from the league. And while initially a decent amount of NBA fans, even non-Houston Rockets fans, were supporting the Rockets in the claims that they were making about the refs, we are now starting to see more people come forward who do not like the Rockets and the way that they constantly complain to the officials. With one report coming from an anonymous NBA coach whose team is still in the playoffs saying, "It's out of control and that included my own team at times. The league needs to do something about it." And then former 25-year NBA referee Steve Javie went on NBA radio yesterday to specifically call out Chris Paul for the way that he constantly is in the officials' ears, saying, "This isn't the first time this player has been involved with referees. Even during my career, he's been very difficult, and I'll put that in a kind way. Very difficult for referees, and it seems like he has a disdain for the referees. I don't know whether that's because he's so competitive. At some point in your career, you have to learn to control yourself more and be a little more mature, and he is not." Now, Steve Javie was one of the more well-known and respected officials in the league before he retired back in 2011 due to no longer being able to tolerate the pain of trying to officiate an NBA game on an arthritic knee. And since his retirement, he has been one of the head guys at the NBA Replay Center that the league uses to review calls made by officials in games. So this isn't some small-time referee making these claims about Chris Paul. And just going through the history books of interactions that Chris Paul has had with officials, you'll start to notice that he has indeed had his fair share of run-ins. Whether it be the time that he was caught mocking NBA referee Ken Mauer earlier this season, which caused Mauer and CP3 to have a very intimate exchange of words, or last season when Chris Paul seemingly cussed out the same Ken Mauer after not agreeing with the traveling call that he had made. Or you could even go all the way back to 2015 when Chris Paul was still with the Los Angeles Clippers. And Chris Paul called out Lauren Holtkamp, one of the few female officials that the league had ever seen at the time, after she gave him a technical foul, saying, "We were trying to get the ball out very fast every time down the court, and when we did that, she said, and I was like, why, and then she gave me a tech, and that's ridiculous. If that's the case, then this might not be for her." Which that actually turned out to be a whole fiasco in and of itself, since then articles started coming out questioning whether or not his remarks should be viewed as sexist. However, going back to the actual game itself, it's clear to see that the referees in that game were simply fed up with the LA Clippers, as that technical that was assessed to Chris Paul was just one of 3 techs given out with a span of just a couple of minutes. Lauren Holtkamp herself responsible for dishing out 2 of those technical fouls. And after yesterday's game between the Houston Rockets and the Golden State Warriors, emphasis was being placed on how well officiated this game was by the Warriors camp, with Draymond Green saying, "Tonight I think it was a great officiated game. They let us be physical, both teams, and they made the calls they needed to make. It was kind of disheartening for a game that I loved since I was a child to see the talk over the last 2 days was nothing about basketball and everything about foul calls. Is that what this game is coming to?" And then Kevin Durant saying, "I felt like both teams, both coaches just let the refs do their job all night. I think the refs did an amazing job, the players did a great job, and the coaches." Even Mike D'Antoni after the game said that the scrutiny of the officials, quote, "shouldn't continue." So that's where we are right now. It seems like the players and the coaches are trying to do a little bit of damage control for the league, as it definitely wasn't a look for the league in Game 1 when after the game everyone was talking about whether or not the league is fixed and these games are being rigged. As for my personal opinion on all this, I do believe that back in game 1, there were a heck of a lot of missed calls that could have went both ways. And the fact that this was a much anticipated game between the Houston Rockets and the Golden State Warriors kind of blew the scale of all this way out of proportion, as missed calls are something that do happen every game and multiple times throughout a series. But when it's a game or a series as important or as hyped up as this one, there's going to be more eyes on it, there's going to be more people talking about it, there's going to be more scrutiny, and that's exactly what we saw after game 1. A series like this with missed calls is going to draw a much bigger reaction compared to something like a series between the Portland Trailblazers and the Denver Nuggets, which is also having missed calls. This is a literal story that got swept under the rug. Damian Lillard and the Portland Trailblazers weren't happy with how their game 1 against the Denver Nuggets was officiated, and yet it wasn't made out to be nearly as big of a deal as this Houston Rockets versus Golden State Warriors game. And I believe Damian Lillard, who was extremely upset during that game 1 against the Denver Nuggets, just gave a great explanation as to why you always see players in the ears of officials. As he says, that's just the competitive nature of guys not wanting their seasons to come to an end. It was a little bit of a heated game when it come to the whistle for us. We'd say something when something needed to be said, nobody got a text, so it wasn't anything disrespectful. But when your season is on the line, you've got to be willing to challenge what's happening out there and try to put your team in the best position to win. Like I said, I believe that's a great representation of how the players might feel and why they contest the calls made by refs so frequently. I think in their mind, it's more of a, you know what, you never know what I might be able to do or say to the officials that might tilt this game in our favor, and especially in the playoffs, you're going to want to be doing that as much as possible since these games mean more than any other game. All in all though, with so much media and so much press surrounding the relationships between players and the officials this season, I don't think that it's going to be too hard to imagine that the league will feel like they have to do something this offseason to make sure that this isn't as big of a deal moving forward. So definitely expect to see some changes going down before next season begins. For our next story of the day, Kevin Durant is set to have his first ever biography published in just a couple of weeks titled KD. And I'm guessing in order to gain some traction in the pre-orders and just to let people know that, hey, this thing exists out there, we really want you to go buy it, we have gotten a few leaked excerpts from Kevin Durant's biography. And of course, this book isn't written by KD himself. He doesn't have time for that, seeing as to how he's a professional NBA player, but instead it was written by local Bay Area journalist Marcus Thompson. And I do have to say that based upon all the excerpts that we did get, the sneak previews, I'm definitely going to be picking up this book when it comes out, as it sounds really interesting. It's seemingly giving us a further insight to the mind of Kevin Durant, and I just thought that this would be a good time to kind of share this with you guys because there were some pretty interesting things leaked out in this excerpt. For example, when the author wrote, Durant doesn't just fight for titles and trophies, he fights for #1 in the court of public opinion. Then going into detail on how Durant felt right after he decided to join the Warriors a few years back, as Thompson wrote that while Durant embarked upon an unplanned Nike trip to China, that he felt exiled. But that's where he found the bottom of the pit. He crossed the Pacific Ocean, but it couldn't escape the viral. He knew it was coming, he didn't know it would be this intense, this unforgiving. Durant was watching the demolition of his reputation happen in real time, even going as far as to the Kevin Durant call his agent asking him why he let this do him to his life, also giving insight to Durant's more sensitive side and his need to be liked by people, saying he's been told by so many not to give the opinions of others so much credence, but he does because he wants you to recognize, needs you to recognize the depths of his greatness. And the most interesting part of all is actually what the final chapter of this biography is titled, The Next Chapter, which has people speculating that this could coincide with the possibility of Durant leaving the Warriors for the Knicks this summer, since when Durant originally left the Thunder for the Warriors, it was through an article that he published on the Players Tribune titled, My Next Chapter. And even more credence is brought to this idea when Thompson writes in his book that, quote, as long as Durant is on the Warriors, his legacy is tarnished. Durant dissenters want him to carry a contender from the ground up, winning as an underdog. Whatever ill will he's created, his success with the Warriors could be washed away by Durant resurrecting the Knicks. If Durant delivered that, he'd be a deity in New York basketball. And that is actually where I'm going to end this story. Really can't wait to read this, as Kevin Durant is one of the more, I'd say, interesting players to learn about in the league, just because of of how sensitive he can be. But I do want to pass a question along to you guys. If Kevin Durant did join the New York Knicks and led an underdog team to an NBA championship, would that change your view on him? Would you then rank him higher all time than you do now? Really curious to see what you guys think. Next up for the day, as mentioned earlier, the Golden State Warriors got the Game 2 win over the Houston Rockets to take a 2-0 lead in this series, with the series now shifting to Houston. Final score reading 115 to 109. Both James Harden and Stephen Curry found themselves injured in this game, however. Curry had to exit the game in the first quarter with what was diagnosed as a dislocated middle finger, but after x-rays came back negative for any structural damage, they popped his finger back into place, braced it up, and he was back in the game. As for Harden, he got whacked across the face, taking a blow to both of his eyes, and had to head back to the locker room for immediate treatment. His eyes visibly red, and he was doing a lot of squinting throughout the game just to try and see when he did return. And after the game, James Harden did give us a little more insight into the discomfort that he feels, saying that he can barely see and that his vision is still blurry. Harden, regardless of his blurry eyesight, still did finish the game with 29 points, while Kevin Durant once again led the way for the Warriors with 29 points as well. And to wrap up this video, Game 2 between the Celtics and the Bucks went down yesterday evening too, and unlike in Game 1 where it was the Celtics who had their way with the Bucks, this time it was the Bucks who had their way with the Celtics, delivering a crushing 123 to 102 blow to Boston. More impressively, the Bucks held all-star guard Kyrie Irving, who was able to do whatever he wanted on the court in Game 1, to just 9 points on 4 of 18 shooting from the field in Game 2. Meanwhile, for the Bucks, Eric Bledsoe, Chris Middleton, and Giannis each scored at least 20 points. Giannis with 29, Middleton with 28, and Bledsoe with 21. That though is going to do it for everything that we do have to talk about today. Really hope you guys did enjoy the video, and if you did, if you enjoyed the video, if you enjoyed this coverage of the NBA, please make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with post notifications turned on so you don't miss out on future videos. Thank you once again for watching though. You guys already know that you are the real MVPs, but with that being said, until tomorrow, keep getting the buckets, Team SDC, and I'm out of here. Peace!